Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is a traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Wolastoqey people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Wolastoqey title and established the rules for what was going to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We would also like to take a few moments to discuss the meaning behind territorial acknowledgements. The territorial acknowledgement is a history lesson. It's a way to create an awareness of Indigenous presence and history on the land upon which we gather, as well as an awareness of Indigenous inherent land and treaty rights. These acknowledgements should be tailored to the different territories and the people who occupy them before contact. Hello, my name is Tiger Levi, and I'd like to welcome you all back to Looking Forward. After a few months off, we are back in full swing with our newest episode. To remind everyone, Looking Forward is a contemporary podcast aimed at showcasing young Indigenous leaders here in New Brunswick. Today we are brought to you by the Joint Economic Development Initiative, otherwise known as JEDI. JEDI is a non-profit Indigenous organization that works with the 16 First Nation communities and off-reserve populations in New Brunswick. JEDI's programs include business incubators and accelerators, advanced ICT training, trades training, and digital and financial literacy training. In addition, JEDI offers reconciliation training on the history of the Indigenous people in Canada and how to implement reconciliation into the workplace. And I would like to give a special thanks to Joanne Ortor and Elsipogtog First Nation. Without Joanne, I would not have the resources and or the confidence to start this podcast last fall. With the help of her and the team at Dialogue NB, Looking Forward was able to not only sustain hundreds of viewers on Dialogue NB social media platforms, but also has been implemented into the Rogers community channel. Without the help of Elsipogtog, we wouldn't have the financial support to develop the production you see today. So with that being said, let's begin. You already started recording, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember how to do these things. It's been a while.
Who was your last one on the show?
Desmond was the last one on the show. Yeah. Then we had actually this guy right here on the show.
Oh, Talon.
Yeah.
I love Talon.
Yeah, he was a good first guest.
We coordinated Mounty's first powwow together.
That's really cool. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. I think we started at this point. So hi, my name is Tiger Levi. Would you like to introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Emma Hassencahl-Perley, and I'm from Nugutguk or Tobic First Nation in Western New Brunswick. And I'm a visual artist, a curator, educator, and an emerging art historian.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We're very pleased to have you. And we were just talking a little bit before we went not live, but before we started recording about actually one of our old guest talent that you know. So that's super cool. So I don't know where to start. I've never had there's just so much that we could talk about with you. It's crazy. I don't know where to start. But first, thank you again for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
I guess I kind of want to know. I guess we can start with something that I was really interested in from the just doing my little bit of research was the ballet that you're involved with, Bisuin.
Bizuin. Yep.
Okay, would you be able to just talk a little bit about your experience with that?
That was a dream that Pizzazz Paul had for, 6 years, if I'm getting my math right. I think he asked me if I would be interested in designing costumes for a ballet that he wanted to do or was starting to put together. And again, that was 4 years ago. And then whenever I would see him in passing throughout the years, he'd be like, "Oh, tell people what we're working on." And I'd be like, "What are we working on?" And he's like, "The ballet." I'm like, "Oh, that's still a thing. Amazing. Yes." And I said yes, on the spot. I'd never done anything in theater and didn't really picture myself there either. And so they brought me in officially 2 years ago, and I started preliminary drawings of some of the characters that they had developed, and the more characters came in, the more drawings I would do. And I was paired with Andy Moreau, who has worked in theater for a number of years, and he does sets mostly. And so we were paired to do design Andy looked at my work and decided that I could lead on costume design. So those roles kind of separated right then and there, which was really cool and kind of scary.
Did you have like what were your inspirations for the designs or and for the costumes?
I think they were just things that I had already been working on since I had gone to school. I was looking at the double curve a lot and what that means, and um, how they represent relationships. And there's a really strong relationship in the story of Bezoin between the son and the mother, and those two characters had to be connected visually. So those two had similar beadwork design elements and double curves in and like a really short definition represent relationships. And so it kind of started from there, from the double curve.
How important to you was the idea of cultural importance when you were structuring these costumes?
I think it was just a matter of representing Wolastoqiyik through visual and material culture that kind of stayed at the front of my mind, because that was important to Pizazim to represent Wolastoqiyik in a really authentic way, to represent also Indigenous characters in an authentic way, despite the fact that some of the dancers were not Indigenous. And a lot of conversations revolved around, like, is this ceremonial dress or is it ballet? Sorry. Is this ceremonial dress or is it ballet costume? And we had to kind of walk that fine line, because a lot of my inspiration was also coming from archival images of Wolastoqiyik regalia. So yeah, just finding that balance was important for us.
That's really amazing. Could you touch a little bit more about the double curve and the meaning of it?
Sure.
Would you be able to expand on it? Because I find it very interesting, and it's a beautiful thing that we see on your murals like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of teachings that I have, probably one of my first is that my grandmother told me that they represent two feet, like two people's feet facing each other, and it's like in a marriage. And I think that we say they represent relationships, and I think that could mean like a relationship to yourself or with another person. And when they're clustered together, those can symbolize communities or families. We can't decipher exactly what they mean anymore, especially the traditional kind of examples of them. And a lot of the newer ones that you're seeing are adapted from those traditions, like in Percy Sokobe's work, in my work, in Natalie Sapier's work. We are evolving them to fit our current context, but they still kind of represent that relationality to other people, to plants, to the cosmos. They bring everything together.
That's really beautiful, actually. So speaking about your murals, can we expand on that a little bit if you're comfortable?
Sure.
Because I seen them. I was at the Nuguktuk Powwow last weekend, and there was, I believe, I'm pretty sure I saw you painting the mural. And then there's the Fredericton Bridge.
Yeah.
Do you have any other places that you have?
I have the Mawu office on the other side of town, and 4 schools from my community. So Masu School, which is in Tobic, and then Perth Andover Elementary, Perth Andover Middle, and then I'll be doing Southern Victoria High School in the same town next month. So I'm really excited. That was like my dream. I wanted to do all the schools. I want to have murals in all the schools. But I started in would have been my first summer after art school, and I can't do math right now, but that was a while ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. I started painting murals, and my former employer, he had bought a campground in a nearby town called Muniac, New Brunswick, and it was Camp Wolastoq, and it used to be a church-run camp. And so they bought it for Wolastoq Education Initiative, which helps youth through education in like math and science and things. And so they bought the camp. They hired me to paint 13 cabins in a campground. So I spent 3 summers doing that while I was in art school. It was like my first my first artist job, and I just fell in love with like feeling the day on my body after like painting for 10, 11, 12 hours. So that's what I try to, if I'm painting a mural, I try to get it done as quickly as I can. So I'm painting for a long time.
So, like, how does it feel to take on such a task like that? Because it seems like, to me anyways, because I can't draw to save my life, it seems like such a daunting, scary task because it's so massive and everyone will see it. But then like the way you do it, it's so beautiful, and like it's like the colors are so vibrant and elegant. I don't know.
Thanks. No, daunting is I think the word, because when I started, I was really like thrown into it. I'd never painted anything to that scale, and again, scale is like, I think the part I love about it is that we're so used to seeing double curves represented so tiny, beaded onto like regalia or other kinds of material. To see them to that scale, I think is, oh, my bad, Jasmine, sorry. I think to see double curves at that scale is something that like doesn't necessarily go with tradition, but it's like expanding on those traditions. So I find that really interesting. I think it's just been like trial and error again when it came time to paint the Bridge to Nowhere. My boss actually helped me with doing the math around that structure, and he did the architectural drawing of the it's like an octagon really, and he put a grid on it, and I had started painting in the same way that I approach beadwork, and I'm often beading on grid paper. So that helps me get my symmetry down. So I put a grid on everything. That helps me kind of map out the rest of the mural.
When did you start beading?
Started beading in my first year of university, and I taught myself using like 2 stitches that I had learned in home ec class, and then I just would look at beadwork all the time and just kind of grow from there.
Where did you go to school?
Mount Allison University.
In Sackville?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great school.
It was. I took fine arts.
I'm sorry. I almost cut you off by mistake. You were saying something really interesting actually about Talon, and Talon was a guest here, I think on our first episode, that you two had this kind of collaboration in your first year?
Yeah, but not in my first year. I was, after my Bachelor of Fine Arts from 2013 to 2017, I started working at Mount A as their interim Indigenous Affairs coordinator. And it was our dream to host a powwow on campus. And Talon was like the student leader behind the powwow, and he really kept it going. He's like, I've done this before, like we can do it. He really got me through that process, and he was such a big help to me. And so together with the rest of the Indigenous student support group, we pulled it off.
How was the turnout? Like, was it?
It was amazing.
It's awesome.
It was a snowstorm that day, and there were hundreds of people there.
Well, that's amazing, actually. There's so much to talk about. I don't know what to talk about next. I'm interested in this too. What's it called? How do you say that? You painted or you crafted designs for the World Juniors, the hockey sticks.
Yeah. The call went out through Maui Art Indigenous Artist Collective, a collaboration between them and Hockey Canada, and when I saw the call right away, I knew that I wanted to apply because I had played hockey my whole life. And I still play ball hockey, not the same, but like I'd play ice hockey throughout high school. And then I had planned to play at Mount A, but I chickened out of the tryouts, and really it wouldn't have worked out anyway because you can't like take fine art homework on the road with you, and they're constantly traveling. So it all ended up working out. I still play ice hockey when I can. But I've been thinking a lot about I've been thinking a lot about the connections between community and sport, not necessarily as an artist, but as like a curator, and I'm interested in developing that further. I kind of want to do a show on sport and art, and so anyways, I submitted my application, and only 4 people had submitted applications, and so they ended up taking all of us because it was such a quick turnaround, and we had to have the designs prepped in our application within a week, and then we got the sticks within a week, and then we had to paint within a week. So everything was like boom, boom, boom. And so it was myself, Lauren, Julian, Robin Paul, and Natalie Sapier, who is a good friend of mine and who is also from Tobic.
Well, that's amazing. Did you say you were a curator?
Yep.
Would you be able to expand on that a bit? Because that's, how old are you?
I'm 28.
Yeah, that's crazy. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. After I stopped working for Monet, I probably could have stayed in Sackville forever. It was a good job and everything, but I wasn't making art at that time.
Yeah.
And it was starting to take an effect on like my mental health, because I have to be creative. Like that's what I set out to do. I want to live a creative life. And so I left my job not really knowing what to do, and I moved home to Tobic that summer in 2018. And then I saw another call for emerging curators, and it was a collaboration between the New Brunswick Art Bank and the Beaverbrook Art Gallery, and they were looking for an Indigenous curator, Anglophone, and Francophone curator. So myself, Emily Grace Lavoie, and Aaron Goodine were hired on to curate an exhibition to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the New Brunswick Art Bank. And we did that for about 8 months, and it opened in February 2019. And my job stayed on. I was like an intern curatorial assistant through Jedi, actually. They funded my internship. And I just fell in love with the profession, and like being able to support other artists in that position, I think is one of my favorite parts, and also telling stories through art exhibitions. And I've been there ever since, and this year, maybe even last year, would be my first full year as the curator of Indigenous art with the Beaverbrook Art Gallery.
That's really amazing.
Thank you.
How do you approach like crafting exhibits?
So one of my first like Wolastoqey artists that I got to curate for was Percy Sakobi, which was such an honor of mine. I love Percy Sakobi's work, and to like, I guess what the process is from the beginning is like, you sit down with the artist, you have a conversation or an interview, kind of like this one, and you write a little bit of a text based on their life, their art, based off of the art that you're showing in the exhibition. I think we showed maybe 10, maybe a little less paintings that he had done. And basically you're just telling his story. And then you put up the work, you print the catalog or the brochure or whatever it is, and then you host an opening. But what's important about all of this is that he's part of our art history in this territory. He's part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. He's part of our Wabanaki art history. And so putting his work into print will ensure that it lives on in a way beyond the painting like it does already. It's really just giving his work context.
Quickly, because this information is not really, widely known all the time, would you be able to explain a little bit more about, the Wabanaki Confederacy and the 5 nations that are in the Confederacy?
Sure. The Wabanaki Confederacy is comprised of Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki, and they formed, I should know this because I teach art history, they formed in the 1800s sometime. I know that they disbanded and then got back together in the 1900s. Somebody's gonna have to fact check that for me, but we're the nations within like the eastern parts of Canada and the US, and formed together to protect each other from harm and threat.
Amazing, thank you. And we go all the way from Newfoundland all the way down to past Maine.
Yep.
I believe. Okay. So there was, oh my God, yeah, co-wrote a novel. Is that true?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That was Wabanaki Modern, and it was an exhibition that my boss and I did. And the project started in 2019, but it finished last year. So it was like 3 years working on this project, and he approached me one afternoon and said, "Hey, do you know anything about the Mi'kmaq Indian craftsmen of Elsipogtog?" That's what they were called then in the 60s. I said, "No, I know nothing. I know nothing about this." And he said, "They were artisans making in a craft shop, but they were like pretty popular. Like, you don't know anything about it. He said, I used to carry around the social studies book with their art in it. And so he brought me an article, and that article said that Michael Francis, who was one of the leading designers, had tapestries in the Teachers College at the University of New Brunswick. And the Teachers College is now the Mi'kmaq Wolastoqey Center.
Yeah.
So we had gone up one afternoon and walked into Star Simon's office, and she had students there. And we saw the tapestries on the wall. They were still there. And I had been in that building before, and I saw the tapestries, but they had like geese on them. It was just a bunch of geese, so I didn't really make the connection. And so we went in and asked them, hey, do you know anything about these tapestries? And the student said no. So we went in to ask Star, and she was on the phone. We're like, hey, sorry to interrupt. Like, do you know anything about the tapestries on the wall? And she was like, no, I'm sorry, I don't, and I'm on the phone. So we're like, okay, so sorry. So we left her office. And then we were telling their students about this project that we wanted to do. And like the designer, Michael Francis, we were looking for his work. And Star heard us when she was off the phone and came out and was like, did you just say Michael Francis? Like of Elsie Bookduck? And we're like, yeah. She's like, he's my grandpa. And so John brought her over to the wall and pointed to the MF signature in the corner. And he was like, this is his work. Like he designed these. And she was like in total shock, disbelief. She was laughing. She was hitting John on the arm. She was like, I can't believe this. And she started crying. She's like, I had no idea that he was an artist. She said, I know him as a storyteller and a singer. And so that moment kicked us off to the rest of what would be like a couple of years of research, and like just a little bit at a time, everything started coming back. And I was really hesitant about pursuing that at first because I know that these kinds of stories exist in like little pockets in our communities and our families, and maybe they don't think about how important they are at the time. And that's kind of like what happened too. I wasn't sure if people would be willing to talk about it, but total opposite happened. The community was so gracious with the information that they shared and so helpful in so many different ways. And so we just wrote the book about that story that we got to unearth a little bit through the help of community members. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. So it was you and your boss?
Yeah, John LaRue.
That's awesome. Where can you find that? Like, if someone wanted to buy it, where can they go and buy it?
We have copies at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. I think you can buy it on Amazon, not sure, and Goose Lane.
So Goose Lane's the publisher?
Yep, Goose Lane Publishing.
That's amazing. So like having all this said, I want to like kind of go back to like the beginning. Like, when did you know this was what you wanted to do? Like when did you get into art? What was your influences?
Probably since I could hold a crayon in my hand.
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people say, but for real, I was drawing all over my bedroom walls. Like, if this is my bedroom, all the walls were covered, even inside the closet. And my mom supported that. I was always drawing in Head Start, kindergarten, all through school until it used to get me in trouble. Like, around the time that I got to high school, I would get in trouble for doodling in class. That's a common story as well. But, like, I always knew that I needed to keep my hands busy to listen. Mm-hmm. I remember this one time I was beading in class at Mount A, and the teacher stopped his lecture and he came over to me, and I thought I was going to get in trouble. And he was like, hey, what are you doing? I was like, I'm making earrings. And he was like, do you take orders? I was like, yeah, I do. And he's like, okay, let's talk after class. And then he just kept talking about like Canadian history. And I thought it was really funny. But no, I think like I knew what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I didn't always know how to get there, but I think like watching people like Samagwini Jajak, Natalie Sapier, find her way through different hurdles and trials and errors and become this artist, that's like exactly what I wanted to do. And she was so helpful even in my journey. So I knew, actually, if I go way back, I wanted to be a lawyer, or I thought I did. That was my grandmother's dream for me, was to become a lawyer. My grandmother is Hassencahl-Perley. And so I was mentally prepared to do that. I got into UNB. I was going to get like a Bachelor of Arts or whatever and then go to law school. But then like towards the end of the application process, my dad was pushing Mount A on me because it had been in Maclean's magazine, and it was like #1 undergraduate university. And so he didn't care what I studied as long as I went to Mount A. And when we went there for hockey tournaments, he would drive me around the campus over and over, like, look at your school, isn't it beautiful? And my art teacher was also persuading me to just apply for art school. She said, you can always do law later if you want to. And so she got the guidance counselor on board, and he called Mount A. And I had been 2 weeks, late past the application deadline, but they're like, you can send something in anyway. And so I did, and I got accepted, so it kind of felt like fate. And I just went from there, art school, and then jumped into curating kind of after, and I've been like doing this balancing thing, and I just finished my master's in art history in October last year.
Well, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So it was once alluded to, like you alluded to in an interview, that it was like the maternal side of your family that was like a big pusher too for art.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could like elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So my great grandmother Marjorie Perley and her sister Juanita Perley are credited for bringing culture back into Tobic at a time where the church still had heavy control. And Juanita took more of like the ceremonial route and wanted to bring back ceremony. And my grandmother was like, I guess more artistic in a way. She was into like beadwork and language and dance. And so I guess like it trickled down the line. I would always watch my grandmother and my mom draw on the borders of their Yahtzee cards. Always, like every weekend they were playing Yahtzee and like drawing. My mom was drawing when I was younger. She kind of put it down, and they were both beaters. So I just kind of grew up around it.
Well, thank you for that answer. There was another thing I wanted to talk about. You teach? Is that what you said? You're a professor? Or you teach? What do you teach?
I'm not a professor, but I'm an instructor in the Wabanaki Visual Art Program at the New Brunswick College of Craft and Design, and I teach art history.
Can you give us some examples of what you teach?
Sure. I guess I'm more into teaching contemporary art than like the history, like the history pre-contact stuff. The anthropological things I'm not too like excited to teach, if I'm being honest. But like contemporary art is where my heart lies. Like, who are the artists making now? Even like contemporary, I mean from the 70s on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a term that kept coming up, when I was researching for this interview, and it's legislative identity.
Yes.
Would you be able to talk about that and open up a dialogue about that?
Yeah. I heard that term for the first time from Ursula Johnson, Mi'kmaq artist, and she had heard it elsewhere, but we were talking at a conference at Mount A, and she was talking about like how the Indian Act has impact on our identities as Indigenous peoples, as status and non-status Indians under the Indian Act, and what that means on like a communal basis, but also on an individual one, and even a national one, and how the Indian Act is just this umbrella document for nations that were and still are sovereign and require different things, but have different needs, but don't have those needs respected through that document. And it's really a threat to our sovereignty. Yeah. And so I did a work called White Flag in 2016, where I take the Indian Act and I run it through a paper shredder, and then I bond those shreds to the red parts of the Canadian flag, because red is like a signifier to Indigenous nations, some Indigenous nations, many, as this symbol for like power, or in this region it's like the color that we buried our dead in red ochre. It's the color we keep our medicines in. And so when you look at it, it's all white, but the red shines through still.
I was gonna bring that up actually, because I've seen that piece of art, and you have a I think you called it a sister piece.
Yeah.
With it. Would you be able to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
The 2 years after, I did the sister piece called Atlamia, and it means she keeps praying, and that's the jingle dress kind of version of that work, and I think it's like this ongoing exploration. And so I took the shreds again and I put them on a red jingle dress. And that one was, I guess, more symbolic of like culture, bands, and how the act policed culture. Not necessarily in the act, but it was a policy that was reinforced. Couldn't dance, couldn't participate in ceremonies, etc., etc. And I modeled that dress after a ribbon dress that my great grandmother made to kind of speak to that history of bringing culture back into our community. And the performance aspect of it is like it was made to fit me, and the more that I danced in it and the cones started to rub up against the paper shreds, it would start to wither away.
Yeah.
So like talking about like what the future looks like beyond the Indian Act.
So the Indian Act is like a very complicated, to say the least, piece of policy that is, its main goal is genocide, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's hard to talk about, but at the same time, it's also like kind of necessary.
Yeah.
We need to find a way to abolish the Indian Act, but respect the treaties, because if you abolish the Indian Act right now, then the treaties like will hold us to them, but the government won't. They won't take the treaties. So it's such a hard balance to. I don't know.
Yeah, when you grow up in a cage, like that's all you know. You don't know what's beyond that cage.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yes.
I don't know who said it, but it's kind of like a trap. So like a cage, it gives us the right to hunt and fish, but it gives us like the right. But the way they implement it feels like they let us hunt in the waters and fish in the forest. So it gives us right, well, but putting ridiculous policies and restraints.
Yeah.
So another question I have here is, so with your involvement of contemporary art and the idea of legislative identity, how could you incorporate cultural identity into art, and how have you personally like implemented that cultural identity? I know the double curve, and then you shredded the Indian Act, but like if you were to teach a class and someone asked you that, how would you respond to them?
It's a loaded question because like we have this conversation a lot in the Wabanaki Visual Art program about what Indigenous art is, who is an Indigenous artist, and like what is the value associated to those things, because not all Indigenous artists want to be painting turtles or feathers or XYZ. And so I think in my case kind of became like a natural thing where like I didn't necessarily want it to be painting turtles and feathers, but sometimes they make sense to the stories that I'm trying to tell and the teachings that they carry. I'm thinking turtles specifically because that's my clan animal. That's where my clan system lies. And so I always told students, if you don't want to be, like you can make stick figures or paint still life paintings or be a video game developer and you're still an Indigenous artist. And so I don't believe in those like boxes around what Indigenous art is. I think it's whatever an Indigenous artist is making. And so I know I'm in like the line of your question, but could you ask me again?
It's just, how could you incorporate your cultural identity, or someone, like if someone came up to you and said, you know, I have a cultural identity, I want to implement it into my art, how would you do that? Or how would you answer that?
I think it's all rooted in like family history and communal history, and I think I've really been paying attention to like what our stories are, what our history is, and how to translate that visually is kind of like an indescribable process in my brain. Like sometimes I see images, sometimes I have to like read something and make notes. Trial and error of like moving things around when I am making an image. But yeah, I almost can't explain how you do that.
That's okay. I think this question was brought up to you a few weeks ago at an IT summit.
Yeah.
And I was at the IT summit, and you were delving into this, I don't know what it was called, augmented reality, or there was some sort of application that you were working on, or filter that you were working on.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. And like when I took the project on, or when I agreed to do the training, I was like, this isn't like AI, is it? Because I couldn't understand the difference. And he was like, oh my gosh, no, absolutely not. I was like, okay, great. And augmented reality is really just this other layer onto my artwork that I almost didn't really expect. It's like digital, but it's 3D in the metaverse. And the project was through Meta, and it's called Spark Indigenous. And our friend Josh trained about 10 of us to do augmented reality filters, is the way I understand them, through like Instagram and Facebook software. And so I will draw my mural digitally on my iPad using Procreate, and then I put a grid on that to help me bring it to scale based on whatever the surface is, if it's a wall, if it's 3 or 4 panels. But then the augmented reality allows me to go back in and like almost share it with a broader audience, and I can take elements from that mural and make them like pop out into space when you're using your camera, or make them spin, or kind of do whatever with them. Just wing it.
So we did this a few times in the previous episodes. It's probably gonna be a little bit different now because it's been a while and I'm a little like don't remember. But we're gonna give you a chance to just kind of say some random things to the camera. So I'm gonna ask you, a series of questions. It's a fast round.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna ask you to like look at the camera and just kind of while you answer the questions. And they're gonna be like, this is something we usually do towards the end of the podcast. I'm just gonna ask you some favorite things and just answer as fast as you can if you want.
Okay.
So what's your favorite food?
Watermelon.
TV show?
Oh my god, I don't know. Next.
Movie?
I really love the Transformers movies. I do, since I was a kid.
That's fair. There's no shame. Linkin Park?
I know they're trash, but I love them.
Linkin
Park, my favorite band. Thank you.
Your favorite novel?
Oh my god, why can I only think of Twilight right now? That's all I read in high school.
It's good.
No, you didn't.
I was like, Twilight.
No, it's not my favorite anymore, I promise.
So
I haven't read a novel, like a nonfiction novel, since I was in high school.
Oh my.
But I love reading academic texts, like nonfiction articles, my favorite.
Do you have a favorite person for your articles or a favorite topic?
Jolene Rickard talks a lot about visual sovereignty. Andrea Bear Nicholas has done so much for our history in this region. Heather Igliorte, amazing Inuit scholar. Michelle Nago, who was my thesis advisor, really important Indigenous, like queer theory and murals. She's amazing. So a lot of women scholars, actually.
Do you like the written word better or poetry better?
The written word.
Takeout or eat in?
Takeout.
Yeah, that's a good one right there. I like takeout too. I'm just gonna end that one in that session right there.
My favorite color is green, emerald green to be specific.
That's a good question. Thank you.
I would rather stay in than go out.
Thank you. So, thank you, Emma, for coming on the podcast here. Before we let you go, I was wondering if you can just give a shout out to all your social media, maybe some of the projects you have coming up.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I'm doing a mural at SV. I'm doing another mural for Fredericton High School, a smaller one, and another one for the forestry school. I apologize, there's like 3 forestry schools in the city, and I'm going there right now to go look at a wall.
Awesome. Where can they find you on social media?
Instagram, so I post a lot of my work. I'm still working on getting a website. I have a website, but it's not the greatest. And so Instagram at Emma_Hassencahl-Perley. Also on Facebook, but I tend to keep that a little bit more private, so Instagram's the go-to.
Do you sell your beads?
No, not really. I don't really sell a lot of my artwork.
That's respectful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please, everyone, do your best to follow Emma on her socials and go check out her next exhibit at the Beaverbrook. It's individuals like Emma that hold the opportunity to inspire generations of new and old, from her exceptional work within the art community to her outstanding work within the representation of the Wolastoqey people. Thank you, Emma, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it.
I forgot to say when my next exhibition was. You just reminded me. It's it'll open in October 16th, if I'm remembering correctly, and it's called Wezawed de Belmasu, which means being responsible for oneself or returning to a former condition of being responsible for yourself. And it's about Indigenous women's leadership in their families and communities.
And when can they see the ballet? Do you have any?
The ballet comes back to Fredericton in the fall.
So
No, I don't remember the date.
both times are in the fall, so if you're in Fredericton around the fall, like, please come check it out.
Yes.
I'll be there for sure.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.